Hi everyone and welcome to today's demo. So today I'm going to be demoing sushi rolls, 3 types to be exact. And for those of you who are not super keen on nori, which is the seaweed that wraps the sushi rolls, I'm also going to give you an alternative on how to make a sushi bowl, otherwise known as a poke bowl. So today, to start out, we're going to wash our hands, make sure that we get all those bad bacteria off them before we set out to do our recipe. And the first thing that we're going to be doing is we're going to be preparing our rice for our sushi. So we absolutely need rice for our sushi bowl and for our sushi rolls. So the type of rice that we're going to be using today is a medium grain rice, and it's a specific type of rice called Cal Rose rice. So this is the no-name version, not particularly fancy. It's a great deal. It's about $4 for a really big bag, so you can make lots of rolls and lots of bowls with this. But you can find other brands at T&T or on Somerset Street in Chinatown. Pretty much everywhere you can buy different types of rice. So I'm going to start out by washing my rice. So I need to get all of the starch that's on the outside of my rice off so that they can adhere properly to one another after they're cooked, all the specific grains. So I'm going to take a dry measuring cup. This is my 1 cup measure, and I'm going to measure out 2.5 cups of rice total. So first I'm going to come over here to my sink, and I have a strainer already in my sink at the bottom here, and I'm going to put my rice straight into the strainer. So I'm going to take my cup, I'm going to level it off in the bag on the side, and I'm going to measure out 2 cups of my Cal Rose rice. And then I'm going to come back here and I'm going to grab my half cup measuring cup. And same thing, I'm going to level it off on the side of my bag. And I'm going to put it in my strainer. Now I need to make sure that I thoroughly rinse this with cold water until all of the starch comes off. So we're going to do that really well, and then once we've done that, we're going to allow it to drain in the sink for 2 to 3 minutes until it's finished dripping, because I don't want to add any extra water into my rice except for the water that I'm going to measure out. And I'm going to preparing my rice today in my Instant Pot. So you have a lot of choices when you prepare your rice. You can prepare it on the stove top according to the package. You can prepare it in a rice cooker, or you can use your Instant Pot. I really like my Instant Pot. I actually have 2, and I'm going to be using my small 3-quart Instant Pot here that I got for Christmas to make my rice today. So my rice is almost completely rinsed here. Okay. And my water is pretty much running clear right now. So I'm now going to just let this sit in my sink, which I cleaned out really well ahead of time, and I'm going to allow that to strain. So while I allow that to strain for a few minutes, I'm going to take out my proteins that I'm going to be using for my sushi. In this case, it's my tuna and my salmon. I'm going to chop it and add some seasoning to it and put it back in the fridge until I'm ready to deal with it a little bit later on. So you can buy frozen tuna steaks or frozen pieces of salmon. And anytime you have frozen fish, obviously uncooked, that's found in your freezer section, for the most part, it's sushi grade. It's safe to eat. And the reason is because it's been flash frozen, all of the microbes that are in it basically have been frozen to death and they've died. Just as we talked before, 2 ways of killing bacteria is heating or freezing. So there's some really cool products at IGA, which is near me, and these are actually called tuna poke cubes, and then these ones are salmon poke cubes. So they're pre-cubed, but I'm actually going to mince them to make them smaller in order to make my filling. So these are each 200 grams, but if you were buying a piece of tuna or a piece of salmon, you need about 200 grams to make maybe 3 good-sized sushi rolls, or 2 nice bowls, okay? Because we're going to be adding a little bit of mayonnaise and sriracha to both of my fillings. So I'm going to start out by taking my fish out of the package, and it's been pre-thawed in my refrigerator overnight. I took this out of the freezer, so you only take it out when you're ready to use it. And I'm going to cut it open, and I'm using a red plastic board here instead of my wooden cutting board because it's food safe, and that way I can easily wash it afterwards. And I'm going to put that fish to the side right now. And I'm going to take out one of my mixing bowls here and put it in the front. And the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to take my little cubes here and put them out on my board. And I'm going to take a large knife and I'm going to mince these slightly, okay? So I'm going to run my knife roughly over top of my fish. It doesn't need to be perfect because it's almost like a mince if I was making like a ground fish. So I'm going to take my knife. This is a santoku. You could also use a 7-inch chef's knife. So I'm going to keep pushing my protein back into the center, running it over until I get a nice chop. That looks pretty good. There's a couple pieces that escaped. Okay, so now I'm going to take my first protein, which is my tuna, and I'm going to put it into my bowl, and I'm going to set it aside just for a few minutes. And I'm going to do my salmon at the same time. So now I'm just going to rinse my hand and my knife off. I don't have to wash it really well because I'm dealing with another fish, but I just want to rinse it off in the opposite sink from where my rice is. And I'm going to now open up my package of tuna, or salmon, pardon me. Both of these, keep in mind, are raw. So you can't buy sushi grade cooked fish. If you're not really into fish of any kind for your sushi rolls, don't feel like you have to use raw fish. You can definitely use different things. You could use cooked shrimp. You can use all sorts of different things. You can use smoked salmon, right? Okay. Okay, so I don't want all those juices in the bottom of the bag. Gonna wash my hands again. And I'm going to rough chop now my salmon the same way that I previously rough chopped my tuna. Okay, and I have another bowl similar size for my second fish, and I'm going to do the same thing. Okay, so before I go ahead and season these, I'm going to wash my hands one more time and I'm going to get my rice started. So my rice is well drained now, and I have my Instant Pot here, and I'm going to take my rice and I'm going to put it inside my Instant Pot, taking care that the rice does not stick to the sides of my Instant Pot or those pieces will not cook properly, okay? So I'm just going to look down in there and kind of poke it around. And then for this recipe, I need to add equal parts of water and rice within my Instant Pot. This isn't the normal proportions if you were going to make it on the stovetop, but this is what the Instant Pot requires. So because I have 2.5 cups of rice there, I'm going to add 2.5 cups of cold water on top of my rice. So I'm using my liquid measuring cup, and I'm making sure I'm accurate with how much water. So there's 1. There's 2. And then a half. Okay. So again, I'm just going to make sure that there's no rice that's making contact or stuck along the insides of my liner. And then I'm going to make sure that my seal is in place around my lid, which is really important. And then finally, I'm going to put my lid on. And when I hear that happy sound, that means that it has a good lock. So this is a new Instant Pot. It's an ultra mini. And when I change the different pressure cook, or the different levels of settings, I should say, I turn the knob here. So I've turned the knob. It's now flashing on rice. It shows 12 minutes, pressure low, and then it has my keep warm function on. I want all of those things. So now I'm just going to press the start button, and it's going to go into the automatic mode. So this Instant Pot here, it's a 12-minute setting for rice. My other Instant Pot, if you'll look in the recipe, it was actually 13. So I'll put 12 to 13 depending on which Instant Pot you're using. Okay, so now I'm just gonna put my fish board to the side for now because I don't need that at the moment. And I'm going to take my 2 fish here and I'm going to season it. And I'm going to season it with 2 different things because these are spicy crispy rolls. I'm gonna take some Sriracha, and then I'm gonna take either plain mayonnaise, or I'm going to take something called Wafu. So Wafu is a Japanese mayonnaise, and it has a little bit of sesame oil added to it. And you can even actually buy a spicy Wafu, which is basically Wafu with a little bit of Sriracha added to it. So it's totally up to you what you put. But I'm going to just use regular mayonnaise, and I'm going to use the Wafu as a topping for my actual poke bowl. So I'm going to take probably a nice scoop. I would say 2 tablespoons of mayonnaise for roughly that portion. And then the Sriracha is personal preference. How spicy do you like it? Sriracha, because it's relatively mild in terms of heat, I'm gonna put like a generous teaspoon to start with, and then I'll test it for heat and decide whether it's good or not. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to take this and I'm going to set it aside, and then I'm going to mix up my tuna, and I don't want to mix my 2 spoons because those are 2 different proteins. And it's a good idea to get these ready first and then allow them to just hang out in the fridge as you get all your other toppings and your mise en place ready. That way you can taste it after the seasoning has had a chance to develop. Okay, so that looks great because the fish is going to kind of absorb some of the flavors, and then that way I can check for seasoning and for heat afterwards. So I'm going to pop these 2 bowls of my fish back in the fridge. Okay, now some of the other things that I'm going to be focusing on for my rolls is the preparation of my vegetables. So for my California roll, there's really only 2 other components. There's cucumbers, which you need a seedless variety, so either a Lebanese cucumber or an English cucumber. And then you also need avocado, and you need to make sure that it's a ripe avocado. So I have some avocados, and I also have these tiny little cucumbers here, which are fantastic for both your poke bowl and for your sushi rolls. So I'm gonna take these and prepare them first. I'm just gonna take the ends off here, and then for my roll, I want long sort of batons. Ideally, probably you're going to put 2 of these side by side to complete your roll, okay? So I'm going to start here by putting my cucumber down on my cutting board, and I'm going to split it in half, okay? And then I'm going to take my knife and I'm going to run my knife over my cucumber and sort of just take the rounded part of my cucumber off. So then I'm left with sort of a nice rectangle of my cucumber. And then I'm going to take my cucumber, careful to tuck my fingers inside, and I'm going to make nice long strips. So I should end up with something that looks like this, okay? So this is ideal to put inside my roll. So I'm going to put those over to the side, and I'm going to repeat the process. And this, because it's a smaller half, I'm not going to trim off quite as much, but I'm going to repeat the process. Okay. And I'm going to do one more cucumber in this format because I probably will only need that many to do like the 2 rolls that I need. So always remembering when we're cutting, I'm using a paring knife. This is the right knife for the job because it's nice and small and I have a lot of control. And I always want it on the flat surface, not on the rounded surface. And I'm keeping my fingers out of the way of the blade and letting the blade do all the work, okay? So trimming, doing the same process here, okay? And then cutting them into the long sticks. Keeping my fingers in a bridge so that I keep them out of the way if I get to a piece that's a little too small. And I'm only going to choose the nicest bits to actually go in my roll. If there's pieces that are sort of like not great, then I'm not going to use those. So I'm going to set those aside, and now I'm going to take the same cucumbers and I'm going to prepare them in a different way, this time for my poke bowl. So I'm going to take my cucumber and I'm going to cut it in half just the way I did for the first one, except this time I'm going to put both of my cucumbers down and I'm going to run my knife down them and I'm going to cut them into quarters effectively. So I have nice little half moons. And now I'm going to come back with my paring knife and I'm going to carefully cut my cucumber into, I would say, sort of 1/2 centimeter pieces. Okay, so this is like a perfect amount for one bowl, which is effectively what I'm going to make. Perhaps I should cut one more just to ensure that I have enough. So we're going to repeat the process. Cut our ends off. Cut our cucumber in half. Making sure to slide our knife along the board, not lifting it up and chopping down. Keeping our fingers out of the way. And now I have 2 cucumbers that have been prepared for my sushi rolls and 2 cucumbers that have been prepared for my poke. So I'm going to move these guys out of the way and then I'm going to put my batons on that there. Okay, so the next thing that I'm going to prepare for my poke bowl is I'm going to prepare my carrot. Okay, now you could either shred your carrot if you're too afraid to do this, or you can do sort of like a matchstick style julienne. Okay, so similar process. I've cut my carrot, which is pre-peeled, into 4, and I'm just going to cut the sort of rounded edge of my carrot off, keeping my fingers out of the way. Okay, so I've made a nice little rectangle. Okay. And I'm going to make nice, long, sort of thin strips. Okay? And if there's a part of your carrot that's too round, then you can turn it over and go down and then do it like this. And then if there's bits that you would rather that they be thinner, then just come back and make some smaller strips. You can also easily just buy the carrots that are julienned at the grocery store, but this is a great way to use up sad vegetables that might be stuck in your refrigerator. It's about good for one bowl. I don't love carrot in my poke bowl, but it's good for color. So the last thing that we're going to prepare that requires a little bit more prep is a mango. So this is an Altufo mango. It's a little bit less fibrous than a traditional red mango. And I'm going to start out by peeling my mango. Okay. A vegetable peeler is not the greatest for a mango because mangoes have a tendency to have pretty resilient skins. So we're gonna trim our mango. This one was starting to look sad, so I thought, why not? Let's use it up. So there may be some bits that we can't really use or a side that we can't use. But in this day and age of not going to the grocery store regularly, we do what we can. Okay, so an Altufo mango has a pointy end and it has a round end. And Altufo mangoes have very long, thin pits. So when you're cutting your mango, what you ideally want to do is you want to slide your knife between the flesh, down the pit to the end, okay? And then we're going to cut it into nice little cubes, okay? Which is ideal for my poke bowl. So there I have my mango. I'm just gonna give my board a wipe off here. And then we're going to do our green onions. So these green onions I've already pre-trimmed and washed. I got all of the sand out from between the layers. And I'm going to just trim off most of the white / root end because I don't want those. Okay, it's a little bit too strong a flavor for what I'm looking for. And I'm actually going to wash my sentuku at the same time. Okay, and now I'm going to chop my green onions. So I have my green onions on a separate board because I don't like the flavors of the onions to go into the board below, and because I have already used my red cutting board, which is for typically fish, I'm going to cut on here. Okay, so I'm using my sentuku and I'm just gonna cut pretty much just the green parts of my onions, carefully keeping my fingers rounded and my fingers tucked in and my knuckles being the primary part that's out. And I'm just gonna cut down until I really don't see very much green left. And then at that point, I'm gonna dispose of the rest of that there. So this is for bite, and it's also for a little bit of flavor. So this is for my poke bowl, not for my sushi. So my Instant Pot shows that it's on. Okay. And the remaining thing I'm going to do are my avocados. So my avocado is ready inside. I already cut it to check because these, sometimes in the little bags, by the time they're ripe, it can be dark inside. And I'm gonna make sure that I take the pit out safely and then cut up the fruit that's inside. So in order to do that, I'm going to take my knife, I'm gonna put it into the pit and I'm gonna turn it about 180 degrees just to get it out. And then my secret for getting my avocado out almost whole is I'm gonna just take a big eating spoon, I'm gonna scoop out the whole thing, and then I'm going to cut it. Okay, so these are the avocados that I'm cutting up for my sushi rolls. Okay. Okay, and I'm going to cut up one more. Oh, this one has like a micro pit in it We're gonna have to cut it again down the center because the pit is so tiny that I won't be able to get it out. These are teeny beeny avocados. Okay, and the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to prepare one avocado for my poke bowl. And for my poke bowl, I like to mash my avocado. So I'm going to choose one that's pretty ripe. I'm going to cut it down the center the long way, as I did previously with the others. And I'm going to take my pit out using a paring knife. I'm going to remove the flesh. And then I'm going to put my avocado into the bowl. Take a small fork and just roughly mash. Now we're not making guacamole, okay? You're just making a mashed avocado to go in your poke bowl, but I will say add a tiny bit of acidity to your avocado just so that it doesn't oxidize and go completely brown. So I'm going to add just a micro splash of lime juice. It can be lemon juice as well, it really doesn't matter. Okay, so here's my mashed avocado that I'm going to be using for my poke bowl versus this is my sliced avocado that I'm going to be using for my rolls. So you really want to differentiate for rolls and for your poke bowl. Okay, so that's pretty much all of my toppings that I need to chop. The last thing that I'm going to be showing you are edamame. So edamame can either be served beside your sushi rolls, or if you're making poke, you can use them on top of your poke bowl. So these are just shelled edamame that you buy in the freezer section at the grocery store. These ones are from TNT, but you can easily buy them from President's Choice and in the frozen veggie section. I have them in a pot here with water, and they're just on my stove top, and I'm going to bring them up to a boil, and then I'm going to reduce them down to a simmer, and they're going to cook for about 5 minutes total. Okay, so once that comes up to a boil here, I will strain those in the same strainer that I used for my rice earlier. I'm going to just put them back in the pot. I'll use a little bit of chili oil and a tiny bit of sea salt to go on top of those. So my edamame are perfectly cooked, and I've gone ahead and I've actually tossed them in a little bit of chili oil, and then I've seasoned them with a little bit of sea salt. So totally up to you about the chili oil. You could use sesame oil or just a neutral oil, but definitely they need the salt. We're just gonna leave these aside. They don't actually need to be hot for our bowl. They can be like room temperature. So my rice is now done. It's 13 minutes in the Instant Pot, and it's done 10 minutes of natural pressure release. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to transfer my rice into a bowl. Now, it's super important that you use a bowl that's non-reactive, as we're going to be adding vinegar to our rice. So wood is ideal, plastic is ideal, and glass is ideal. Try to stay away from metal as much as possible, because if you don't know the content of the bowl, aluminum can be problematic, okay? So I'm going to take out my rice, which looks awesome, but is extremely hot. And I'm going to take my rice paddle, and I'm going to transfer and break up my rice into my bowl. Your goal is to kind of spread it out so that you can see the steam coming off of it. Cools down a lot. And then as you go, you're going to kind of add a little bit of vinegar, sort of like in layers. And then we're going to actually spread this out kind of almost like up the sides of our bowl to get the maximum surface area. If you've ever watched Japanese videos, they'll actually use huge, almost like salad bowls. So this here is a half of a cup of rice wine vinegar, and then I need to add another 2 tablespoons to my rice total. You want to make sure that it's really well seasoned. Rice wine vinegar, you can buy the seasoned variety or the unseasoned variety. The variety that I'm using is seasoned, so it means that there's extra salt and sugar that's actually been added to. So this is the last of my rice here, and then we're gonna do our last 2 tablespoons of rice vinegar. So this is the rice wine vinegar that I'm using, and you can see on the label it actually says that it's a seasoned rice wine vinegar, and it shows that there's sushi on there. So it's ideal for sushi rice. This is just a PC one. So I'm gonna take the last 2 tablespoons that I need to add. That's why we're doing it over a measuring cup. I'm gonna put that in there, and then finally I'm gonna mix it around, sort of just move it around my bowl and sort of spread up the sides. You're gonna probably have to give this a good, I would say 10 minutes before you can go ahead and handle it. It's okay if it's warm when you handle it, but you don't wanna burn yourself. So like I said, as much surface area as possible. And the more you mix, the more heat is gonna escape and the more evenly your seasoning is gonna be spread out. Okay, so we're just gonna leave that alone now. And I'm gonna try a little bit, which is very hot. Tastes exactly like sushi rice should. It's got a little bit of acidic bite. You can taste the salt, and it's quite sticky. So you can see in the bowl, it looks quite nice. Okay, so I'm gonna take this and I'm gonna set it aside, and I'm gonna allow that to cool. Just wash my hands off since they are a bit sticky. And I'm now going to prepare the last ingredient for my rolls. Okay, so the last ingredient that I'm going to be using, especially for my California roll, is a product called Pollock, and it's basically formed crab. It's not actual crab, but it's called simile crab or like crab. And you buy it usually in sticks or flakes. For sushi rolls, you ideally want the sticks. You can actually see on the package, they're showing that there's rolls present there. So this is an easy open package in theory, and they're crab flavored. So they're like little batons of fish, so you can see here. And they have kind of like pink coloring added to them so that they look almost like they're crab, but they're just a very neutral white fish. So I'm going to take my crab sticks here. I would say I need probably, let's say 6, and put the remaining ones back in the fridge for right now. Now, if you want to make smaller rolls that have maybe 6 pieces, you might want to just trim this in half lengthwise if they're really thick. These ones from Cloverleaf seem to be on the thin side, so I'm actually just going to leave them the way they are. It's sort of like the perfect size. And I'm going to put these on my platter here for building. I'll just put that down. In a minute, I'm going to start to build my sushi rolls. So when I am building my sushi rolls, I obviously need to build on something. So let me just clean this off here. So here I have 2 bamboo mats. I've covered 1 bamboo mat with saran wrap. You can see that it's shiny. And then I have this other bamboo mat here, which has no saran on it. If you just have 1 bamboo mat, just start with the saran and then take the saran off if you're going to do another type of roll. The saran is ideal if you're putting your rice on the outside of your sushi roll. So think things like a California roll, or I don't know, like a kamikaze roll, or any of the fancier rolls that have tempura in them and you want to put rice on the outside, this one here is more ideal if you're putting your rice on the inside. So this way it's not going to, the nori is not going to stick because there's nothing sticky. Now, what is it that we're actually going to put our sushi rice in? Well, I have two different options here. So the most traditional option is nori, which is a roasted seaweed sheet, and they're typically pretty small. You can get some that are slightly larger, but these are like an ideal size. You might be able to get these at your grocery store, or you may have to go to a specialty store depending, but most grocery stores have an international section now and even have a sushi counter at them, right? Like at the grocery store where you can kind of buy these. If you don't like the taste of these, because they do have a fairly pronounced, I would say, sea taste, you can sometimes buy these, which are actually soy wrappers, okay? So these here are separated by pieces of saran. They're very delicate, and they're basically, their purpose is just to hold the rice together inside. So you can see here that there's a lot of rolls, but this is something where you don't put the rice on the outside. The rice can only stay on the inside after you roll it up, okay? So I'm just showing this option, but I'm gonna go with the more traditional nori for most of my rolls, just because I like the flavor of the nori. Okay, so I'm going to take one of my nori sheets and I'm going to be starting with my California roll. So because I'm starting with my California roll, I'm going to start with my saran wrapped bamboo mat. So I'm going to take my nori sheet, and there's a smooth side to your nori sheet and there's a rough side to your nori sheet. You need to make sure that the rough side of your nori sheet is up. And you'll notice there's actually lines, dotted lines that are on your nori sheet, and that helps you to break the nori if you want to make a smaller roll. But because I'm making slightly larger rolls today, I'm going to leave it intact. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to take my rice. Now, when I'm taking my rice, I'm going to take a baseball-sized amount in my hands and I'm going to push it out onto my nori sheet. And because of the rough texture and the sticky nature of the rice, it's going to adhere to it. So a baseball-sized piece of rice, and I'm going to start in the middle and just kind of build outward. You don't want a super, super thick layer of rice, otherwise you're going to end up with an enormous, thick, kind of gooey, almost roll. So if you can see the nori through in some parts, that's totally fine. Just make sure that you're kind of keeping a little border at one end, so one of the little lengths, and then spread here all the way. So now I've pretty much got my rice from edge to edge, and I have a border of about an inch to an inch and a half on one of the ends, depending on how big my nori sheet is. So these, like I said, are smaller nori sheets. Some of the ones out there are slightly larger. So this is my California roll. So now this is actually going to be the underside of my California roll in a second. So the one thing I'm actually going to do before I flip this over is I'm going to lightly sprinkle my rice with toasted black and white sesame seeds. And you want to make sure that your hands are really dry when you're touching the nori, because you don't want to add extra water to this. So now I'm going to take my sheet and I'm going to flip this over, tidy it up a little bit, and now I'm going to start building my roll. So in a California roll, you have three ingredients. You have the pollock, which is the fake crab, you have your cucumber, and you have your avocado. So I'm going to start with my pollock, and I'm going to start at the end here, and I'm going to look at how much pollock I need in order to make a perfect roll. So your goal is to have your filling from edge to edge. And then the same thing for your cucumbers, so choose nice pieces. Okay, edge to edge roughly. And then finally, I'm going to take my ripe avocado. So I'm going to put that on top, and I'm going to make a nice line of avocado. Now, if you want to season the inside of your roll, go ahead. There's different seasonings that you can use. This one is called Shichimi Togarashi, okay? And it kind of has, like, I would say Szechuan chili flakes. I think there's a bit of salt and some other things, some Japanese seasoning. It recommends for ramen, skewer food, or making sauces, but you can also use it just as like a sprinkle to go on top of your avocados. Okay. So now when we're starting to roll our sushi, what is it that we should be doing? Well, we need to take the edge of our mat and we're going to start to roll it away from our body. So I'm going to take my mat and I'm using the mat itself and I'm pushing down as I roll, and then I'm kind of pushing on the roll itself. And because of the way that I have stuck my rice on and the fact that it's now down, it should ideally come out nice and cylindrical. Okay, so you can see if I look at it this way, inside my roll, well, obviously we haven't cut it yet, but it looks pretty nice. And then if you don't have enough sesame seeds on the top, like you're not happy with it, then you can, when you put it on your platter, right, we can go ahead and sprinkle a few more over the top. Now, if you were plating this like for company or something, you would cut this up and then sort of stagger the pieces. And you could easily sprinkle the top with the Wafu dressing that I showed you earlier, which was the traditional sesame dressing, and you could add a little bit of Sriracha to this, or you could use some of your Sriracha mayonnaise or something like that. Or there's even something called eel sauce, which you can drizzle. So now I'm going to set this aside, and I'm going to be doing my rolls that don't require the plasticized surface. And the reason they don't require the plasticized surface is because the rice is not making contact with the actual bamboo. So I'm going to take my nori here, okay? And I'm going to do the same procedure as I did before. Starting in the middle. Okay. Beautiful. So I have a nice border that I've left again, and this just helps me to roll it nicely. So now I'm going to start with my tuna here. So for my spicy crispy tuna, I have my mayonnaise mix with the Sriracha, and you can see it's a nice consistency. It's pretty thick. Okay, when I hold it up, it's kind of sticking to the spoon. So it's a good consistency. You don't want to overload your roll, so keep that in mind. It's better to have some left over for your poke bowl or whatever than to overload your roll. So you're going to put a nice line right at the edge. That looks perfect. You kind of want to make sure that you're going end to end, because otherwise, oops, one piece is going to have like no fish in it. And then we're going to add the crispy part of our spicy crispy. So the crispy part, which is really cool, is a ready to serve tempura. So normally what you'd have to do is you'd buy like a tempura mix, or you could even make your own tempura, which is typically flour, seltzer water, sparkling water, and a little bit of salt. You make a batter, and then you would drizzle this into fryer oil, and then you would fish it out with a strainer or a spider. And then you would crumble it up and put it inside. But this is actually a ready-made product that was available at the sushi counter at my local grocery store. So I'm just going to take it, and I'm basically going to, same thing, put a line of it beside my fish. And then depending if you like it more spicy or not, I'm just going to take a line of Sriracha and put it there. And then I'm going to take my Togarashi spice that I used before that has the Szechuan peppercorns in it. and I'm going to give that a sprinkle on the inside. So same procedure as before. I'm going to start with the part that's towards me. I'm going to push down, okay? And I'm going to continually push, going across, not squishing, but just a firm pressure and rolling forward. Okay? And then once I get, oops, it pooped out the end a little bit. I maybe overfilled it. Once I get to the end, then you should have a perfect roll, which is nicely stuffed. Okay? And then I'm going to bring my platter back again. And I'm going to place that roll there. These are big rolls. That's why I was saying to you, I'm going to put that over on a plate and then I'm going to use that for my poke bowl afterwards. Okay, I'm just going to put that down in front of me. So now we're going to build the last type of roll. And it's the same procedure using my nori. I have my rice here. Okay, so I've now spread my rice edge to edge while leaving a border. And I'm just going to hold up my bamboo mat so that you can really see how well spread my rice is. And again, I don't want it to be terribly thick. Okay, it's okay if we see the nori through there. And I'm going to build my last type, which is my spicy crispy salmon. So I got a little bit carried away with how much fish I put in the other one because I just love it so much and I'm pretty excited to eat these, I'm not gonna lie. But I'm gonna put a tiny bit less fish in this guy here. And then to supplement it, I'm actually going to use a little bit of avocado. So just some smaller pieces that I have here. And then the same thing, I'm going to take my crispy tempura. And I'm going to put my layer of tempura in there. And then a tiny strand of sriracha. And finally, my togarashi. Okay, and same procedure, starting beside us, pressing down, rolling outward, making really good contact, and beauty. It still pooped out even though we put less, but it's a beautiful roll. Like you can see how proportionate it is and then filling inside, and that's a really nice looking roll. So we're gonna build our poke bowl, and you want a nice medium-sized bowl to build this. Don't get too carried away because rice is pretty heavy. So take a good amount of sushi rice, put it in the bottom of your bowl. You can actually make a poke bowl without rice. You can get it with rice noodles, and you can also get it with just lettuce greens and things like that if you are just tired of rice. But I'm gonna fill my bowl up, I would say a third of the way with rice. And then the rice is seasoned, but I'm going to use my Wafu, that thing that I keep talking about is that sesame mayonnaise. And I'm just going to lightly drizzle a layer over my rice. So I'm gonna start building from there. So first thing that I'm gonna do is I'm gonna focus my attentions on my proteins. So I'm going to place a protein on each side of my bowl so that it's pretty, and I'm gonna use a portioning scoop, my muffin size, and I'm going to put 1 scoop of my spicy salmon and 1 scoop of my spicy tuna. So just on each side of the bowl, and then I'm just gonna sort of start building out from there. So I'm gonna take the larger ingredients first. So things like my cucumbers, okay, and my edamame. And then we're going to put our mango, which unfortunately has oxidized a tiny bit, but will still taste really good. A bit of carrot on that side. And then I'm going to take my small portioning scoop And I'm going to start to build the other things. So I have my mashed avocado here. So I'm going to put a nice generous blob of that sort of right in the center. And then I'm going to take some of my toppings and some of my garnishes. So I have here pickled ginger that I would normally serve with my sushi. And this is the uncolored stuff. So if you ever see some of the stuff that's like hot pink, it's just the same stuff, but it just has colorant that's put into it. Then I have the tops of my green onions here, which I've nicely cut, and I'm gonna put those on the side. And I also throw a few of those over the top. And then the final thing that I'm going to put is some of my crispy tempura, okay? So you can either put it all over the top, or it's prettier if you just kind of put it in a couple of areas around your bowl. Okay, and then the final thing that I'm going to put on for the major toppings is a little bit of my sesame seeds, okay? So I'm gonna sprinkle some sesame over top, the toasted, and then you have a choice. You can either put more of your Togarashi seasoning, or there's other types of seasonings that you can buy too for poke bowls. So this looks really nice. And then totally up to you, but you can use more of your Wafu on top. You can use your Sriracha if you want that. It depends on if you like the creaminess, or if you want something like that's a little bit more acidic. You could also do something just like a little bit of low sodium soy. Okay, but if you look at this, the colors that are in that are spectacular, and it looks ready to dive into. So I'm now going to cut the rolls that I've made, and you can see that the seam side is down. They're nice and stuck. I need a large knife, preferably a chef's knife or a sentuku because of the marks that are on the blade. It will help us to cut cleanly without it sticking. Of rolls this size, you generally want about 8 pieces. If they're slightly smaller, if it's just an avocado roll or a mango roll or something like that, then you're going to have 6 pieces, okay? So I have my roll, I've cut in half, and now I'm going to cut this roll in half again, okay? So you can see that they're starting to look really nice. And we're cutting cleanly through, and now you can see the inside of the beautiful roll, okay? So you can see all my fish and my seasoning and everything. It looks great. And I'm now going to plate those. And if you have the end bit where it's a little less attractive, just make sure that you put that side of your roll down. I'm just going to clean my blade off because you can see the inside of this one is just as beautiful. It's got our pollock, it's got our avocado, and it's got our cucumber. And it has the rice on the outside. Okay, well now we're going to cut our last roll. This is the one that had lots of fish in it. This is like the large specialty rolls that you get that sometimes have like crab legs hanging out of them. And check out the inside of that one. Okay, so we're gonna plate these up nicely here, just like they would if we were in a restaurant. We're just gonna reorganize a little bit. Okay, so here's my platter of all of my beautiful sushi that I've made. It all looks delicious. And then I have here that I'm gonna serve it with, I have my wasabi and I have my pickled ginger. And then I have a little bit of my low sodium soy sauce, which I'm going to put there. And finally, I'm going to give it a taste. So I like a little bit of my wasabi in my soy sauce to give it zip. And I'm going to go for that huge roll that I made earlier. Mmm. The flavors and the texture are amazing. It's got the right spice. It's got a little bit of crunch from the tempura. It's delicious. You definitely have to make this.